Law of permission in operation. Eternal consciousness is the source of balance and harmony and cannot be anything other than these states. Consciousness is embodied in a reality through laws of being. Permission is a key part of the structure of law because permission is what is allowed as long as order and balance remain undisturbed or is enhanced. Harmony occurs in being, not as a fixed state of equilibrium, but as a dynamic state. In other words, harmony is the result of continual adjustments to time, place, and condition. Harmony is achieved through dynamic equilibrium as the parts that contribute to the whole are in action and in motion, allowing for constant adjustments. Permission is vital to achieving harmony. Permission helps to ensure that the adjustments that need to be made fit into and are workable in the system. Depending on the circumstance, various laws determine what is permitted and what is not. Revealed in humanity. Permission is an operation of properness. The question is, what are you permitted to do within a particular time, place, and condition? Standards of properness come both from human beings and from laws of being. Human standards of properness concern appearances, such as plants, animals, and the earth itself, in addition to other human beings. In the human realm, permissions are granted by people in stations of authority. For best results, consult conscience to discern permissions and conscious actions. Permission is part of the operating system in every domain and structure. In other words, in all domains, there are proper ways of behaving that cover what is permitted by conscience and what is not. For example, when you are celebrating a big event, you may act differently than when you are at the doctor's office. A mechanism is a structure for producing results, and the mechanism for permission is conscience. Awakening conscience is a very important step on the spiritual journey. Living by conscience is central to living a virtuous life. There are many levels of permission, and there are levels within levels. For example, everyday permission is given to us by human laws, such as those related to transportation. One of the key factors of permission involves the space you are occupying. For example, leaders often have permission to access more information than entry-level workers. Permissions are often hidden in the background conversations of life. Therefore, you may not be overtly aware of them. For example, personal space is generally an unspoken boundary that varies from person to person and from culture to culture. Hidden permissions are rarely explicitly spoken. Allowance is a type of permission that provides some leeway. When one of your duties is revealed to you, you may not need to fulfill it right away. There may be an allowance for delay. This is similar to how you might request and receive permission to extend a deadline for various reasons. The law of permission is one of the pillars for why people are required to take personal responsibility for their lives. A person has to decide which permissions exist for whatever actions they are taking. No one can fully decipher someone else's personal responsibility. When people ignore or disregard taking responsibility for their lives, they are in violation of the law of permission. This is because people do not have permission to escape responsibility indefinitely. Permission acts as a catalyst for action and progression to occur. This applies both to permissions that already exist and permissions that are newly granted. Making a request and getting permission can start a chain of actions that create a result. For example, you can request permission to introduce people to each other, and a new endeavor, a wedding, or a disagreement could result. Ultimately, permission rests on a foundation of consciousness, and you receive awareness of permission by properly consulting conscience. Consulting conscience connects you with eternal consciousness. Conscience informs you when you are veering outside the boundaries of permission. You are free to ignore the boundaries and experience the consequences. Humanity addresses permission in the story of Adam and Eve. When the couple is operating in consciousness, balance and harmony happen automatically. When they break the law of permission, the result is challenge and suffering. The Bible, at its most profound level, is about the operation of the eternal in the human world. For humanity, balance shows up when we follow laws of being, and we follow laws of being by listening to wisdom. Antithesis. The antithesis of permission is unwarranted interference. People interfere improperly when they are engaged in selfish personal conversations without regard to conscience. Negating another person's beingness without their permission results in painful consequences. Negating includes diminishing another person's freedom and not allowing space for how another person exists. Note that in situations of great imbalance, the ensuing chaos clears the way for renewal. Application: how to be responsible with permissions. Distinguish which permissions you have and which you do not have. Some permissions are embedded in and activated by the space that has been created. For example, in a wrestling match, contestants have permission to grasp onto each other in a variety of ways within the rules. Another example is that when you get married, you agree to give and receive permissions at a much deeper and broader level than when you first start dating. Gain clarity about the permissions you wish to give and receive, and have conversations about these clearances and agreements so that you can live in effective and productive relationships. Avoid making assumptions about permissions, and gain competency in making clear requests and establishing proper boundaries. Asking for and receiving permission makes interactions easier than when expectations are vague or unclear. Be aware that some permissions are not individually granted, but are inherent in the space, or are given by the stations in life. These permissions arise as community standards out of the need to be functional. Do not expect community standards to bend to your personal desire. For example, there are community standards for timeliness and punctuality that may not coincide with your personal preferences. It is effective to distinguish the source of the permission. The proper source is laws of being. Beware of causes masquerading as proper sources. You may want to satisfy some human desire and take liberties that are not granted by conscience. For example, you may want food that is on someone else's plate. Ask permission before taking it. The objective is to see things, activities, and relationships as they fit into the operation of oneness, even when they seem small or inconsequential. Permissions confer power in an intimate way, so behave responsibly with both the ones that have been granted and the ones that have been withheld. Note that permission in one domain does not automatically transfer to other domains. Even when permissions do transfer, specific operations may differ. For example, you might give a mechanic permission to drive your car, but not for the purpose of running errands. The source of permission is your conscience, which you consult when you apply laws of being. Ignoring conscience is a recipe for painful learning. Focus on the law of permission to develop your own inner wisdom. Following the law of permission is also known as operating proper to the space.